Hello Internet, welcome back to Tromsø Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, talk to you, the world, the cosmos, the universe, about books, movies, music I enjoy, find interesting, or a combination of the two. It's the end of 2025. This year was not the best year, but there was some very good music released this year, and I'm going to talk about my 10 favourite albums of the year, starting with 10, ending with 1, and then at the end of the video I'm going to talk about 5 other honourable mentions that for various reasons I didn't include in my top 10. Before we start, I should just say a couple of things. One of them is that I'm not claiming that these are the best albums of the year. These are albums that for various reasons were meaningful for me this year. I would love to hear from you about the albums that you enjoyed this year. Very often it's in January, February that I actually discover all the good music from the previous year, because that's when I start reading and listening to everybody's lists. So get in the comments, give me your list. I would really love to hear it. I would love to check some of that stuff out. Without further ado, let's do my list. Number 10, Birthing by Swans. Now, Swans were my absolute favourite band when I was in my early 20s. I actually credit them potentially with saving my life. And I just have enormous admiration both for Michael Girard and for Jarbo and for all of the stuff that they did from the 80s through the 90s. Swans reformed, I don't know how long ago now. I think it was like back in 2010 approximately, because they broke up at the end of the 90s and they had about like a 10-year hiatus. In that time, Michael Girard was making music as Angels of Light. I really love some of the Angels of Light stuff. To cut a long story short and to make this brief, I didn't really enjoy most of the Swans albums after they reformed. I have seen them live twice and really, really loved it, but I've not really gotten into their recorded output in their later iteration until this record. I think this album is just incredible. It's the last album in this version of Swans, what Girard calls an expanded version. They've moved into a very large experimental sound. They've always used a lot of repetition, but they now use kind of more noise sections. They don't have as clear song structures as they used to. Like they'll have several parts in a single song. But what I really love about this Swans record, which I believe Girard thought was going to be the last one when he made it, is that you hear him also referencing music that I think was inspirational to him when he was young. So although Swans have always been like a kind of post-punk, gothic, experimental band, there's a song on this album, I Am a Tower, that sounds like Heroes by David Bowie. There's another section on another song that sounds like Pink Floyd. And the last thing I want to say about this album is that it's not dark. A lot of Swans material is very dark. It's confronting mortality, it's confronting violence in ways that can be quite grueling. This album has something totally ecstatic about it. It's very beautiful, almost transcendent, at the same time as it's still noisy and discordant at times. You also will hear a dog barking a few times throughout the runtime of the album. Number 9, Vauruvã. The album is called Mar de Deriva, I believe. The musicians who made this album are Brazilian. One of them does the vocals and writes all the texts, and the other one plays all of the music. And the music on this album is a cross between Brazilian folk music, psychedelic music, and black metal, but black metal in the kind of ambient, expansive sense. I hate to mention Burzum, but maybe influenced a little bit like by something like Philosophem by Burzum. If you really hate black metal, you probably won't like this, but if you're open to things influenced by black metal, I would recommend checking it out. From the album art to the music to the feeling that you get, this has a very cosmic, expansive sound to it. It's almost like, going back in time to Aboriginal art, music, culture, and at the same time sort of reaching out into the cosmos. Number 8, Horror, Tomorrow We Escape. This is a rap, punk, metal, experimental album. It's extremely creative in its production. The vocals are insane. They're everything from very convincing, hard, somewhat threatening, but also exhilarating rap to shouted vocals, screamed vocals, singing, auto-tune. It's just wild. It's all over the spectrum, referencing punk, pop punk, but also noise and experimental sounds. If you think this sounds awful, you will hate it. I guarantee it. If you're interested in any of those kind of combinations of sounds, I think you might really enjoy this album. To me, it's endlessly exhilarating. I listen to it on the way to work, I listen to it on the bus. It just actually makes me feel happy because it's so daring. And also, Chelsea Wolfe makes a guest appearance. Would you believe it? There's a kind of gothic song towards the end where she's singing and playing acoustic guitar, and then the vocalists come in and start rapping on it as well. And it shouldn't work, but it's just great. Number 7, Kaitlyn Aurelia Smith, an American electronic musician, singer, songwriter, and composer. I've seen her live, thought she was amazing. I was really looking forward to this album. It did not disappoint me. It's right in that sweet spot of kind of experimental electronic music and almost pop influenced songwriting. Very repetitious at times, but not in a way that's grating, more in a way that's hypnotic. Reminds me somewhat of The Knife. I made a full video about this album and I'm going to link it in the description. Number 6, John Zorn, Fantasma, a Surrealist Mirror. Another American composer, but from another generation and another field, I guess. More like a jazz, rock, experimental composer known for his work with Naked City. This album is written for a jazz ensemble and classical musicians. There's a lot of vibraphone, drums, upright bass, some piano, some electronics. I kept coming back to this album all year. It's so unique. It's highly experimental without being something that pushes you away. I can listen to it over and over and over again. Always discover something new, always discover something I enjoy. I also had to include this on my end of year list because it encouraged me to go back to John Milton. There are 3 tracks at the beginning of this album that are called Paradise Regained, which is a John Milton poem I didn't know about, and I'm now reading Paradise Lost, and I'm going to read Paradise Regained because of this album. Even if you've heard John Zorn before and thought that his work is too abrasive, I recommend you check this out. You might feel differently. Oh, I should also say about that album that I did a video where I tried to describe it in detail. I don't know if anyone's ever watched that video to the end. I tried to watch it the other day and even I can't understand what I was talking about. That's how complex and strange this album is. Number 5, Some of Our, Spectral. Now, Some of Our originally was an ambient solo project by a guy from Switzerland, and it was sort of gothic ambient synthesizer music, and I did quite like that. But I saw them a couple of years back at Colossal Weekend in Denmark, and they were a trio with a drummer and a guy doing vocals and playing some kind of synthesizer machines, creating sounds. When I walked into the room, I thought this music is genuinely evil. It's like malevolent. But the longer I listened to it, the more hypnotic it became. And actually, it wasn't dark, it was just very hypnotic and strange. It had almost a supernatural feeling to it. I listened to this new album, Spectral. It has aspects of that same sound that they had when I saw them live, but they've kind of combined this hypnotic, doomy, metal influenced sound with dark psychedelia and also with krautrock that might remind you of Can or Faust, especially in some of the drumming. The vocals are super strange, lots of kind of growling and different sounds, not much by the way of lyrics that you can make out. I kind of enjoy that type of thing. It might put you off, but I recommend giving this album a listen if you're into experimental music. Okay, my album number 4 of the year is Emma Ruth Rundle's album Music from the Bella Vista. Emma Ruth Rundle released a book called The Bella Vista. It's a book of poems. I'm going to link to my discussion of the book in the description. This is the music that she released as a kind of accompaniment to that book. It's 2 longer tracks which are pieced together piano improvisations that she did while she was on tour. You can hear sounds in the background. I think she's taken field recordings and mixed them in. And then in the middle of each of these 2 tracks, she reads one poem from the book in each track. I can listen to this album over and over again. It's so high on my list because I never get bored of it. I mean, I really have a lot of respect and admiration for Ruth Rundle in the first place, but I don't love all of her albums. It's not like I'm completely uncritical in my appreciation of her. I think this album just has the most beautiful atmosphere, and I also find it really inspiring. I'm very inspired by people who will take work in progress or take ambient sounds from around them and stitch it together to make a piece of art. When it works, I think it's beautiful. And for me, this is an example where it really, really works. Okay, album three, my albums of the year, is Clipping, Dead Channel Sky. Dead Channel Sky is a concept album from this experimental rap trio who are signed to Sub Pop. They are two producers and a rapper, David Diggs. I think David Diggs is extremely underrated as both a lyricist and a performer. He doesn't have the most vital style of delivery, but he's very smooth and he's extremely technical. And his writing, just on a pure level of both wordplay and content, is so impressive. I dare anybody to name somebody working in rock music or pop music doing anything as creative as Diggs does in his writing. This whole album is referencing classic cyberpunk literature like Pat Cadigan and William Gibson and so on, and telling these stories within this framework, but also at the same time commenting on the state of American politics, the state of the world now, technological development in recent years. There's the last track is a kind of story of the development of the internet, I realized after I listened to it a few times, and ends with this music that kind of sounds almost like a cross between Aphex Twin and a computer game. Anyway, I did a whole video about this album the first time I heard it, which I'll link in the description. There were many things I hadn't understood yet. And one thing I'd like to come back and say now is that the shorter tracks and the interludes, which I didn't necessarily appreciate on first listen, have really grown on me, so that the album as a kind of sonic journey overall, I just think is incredible. I love this album. Maybe it even could have been higher on the list. Okay, number two. This is an album that came out very recently. I do think there's some argument that maybe there's a recency bias to this album and actually the number one album also. They both came out recently, but I listened to them so much and I love them so much, and especially this one. I am convinced that if it had come out at the start of the year, it would still be on my end of year list because it's just blown me away. And it is Blut aus Nord, Ethereal Horizons. Now, Blut aus Nord are an experimental French black metal band. This album has none of the frightening, abrasive, unpleasant side of black metal that you might associate with the genre. It's melodic, there's harmonic, clean vocals on a lot of the album. I often don't like harmonic, clean vocals on heavy music. It can sound quite cliche, but the vocals on this album almost remind me of Robert Smith from The Cure. The images that I get in my head when I listen to this album, it's like night, it's like outer space, it's very beautiful. The album artwork looks like some kind of alien monoliths on an alien planet in another solar system, and that's the feeling that you get when you listen to it. I increasingly am drawn towards music that pulls me out of this world and kind of places me almost in a dream space. And this album, as fast and intense as it can be, really does that for me, kind of lifts me into some kind of dreamy, imaginative space. And I think, you could have this on while you were painting or while you were writing. I really love it. Album number one for this year, 2025, is a collaboration between Philip Glass, the composer, and Tenzin Choegyal, the Tibetan multi-instrumentalist and poet. The album is called Be the Sky. Tenzin Choegyal is a Tibetan musician influenced by folk music from Tibet, who is a Buddhist and a kind of representative for Tibetan Buddhism. He's in exile, has been for a long time. I believe he lives in Australia now. He's collaborated with Laurie Anderson, and I have that album. I like it, but it's a lot of spoken word. This album, you really hear the influence of Philip Glass, who, if you don't know Philip Glass, he's a minimalist composer, but he's done a lot of film music. So it almost sounds like film scores a lot of the time. There's lots of very beautiful arpeggiated pianos, and then these Tibetan instruments, stringed instruments over the top. Tenzin Choegyal has this beautiful singing voice, uh, very, very moving, very, very beautiful. There's something quite naive about the compositions. And then the lyrics or the words, they are poems that he's written. They're a lot about identity and kind of the Buddhist idea of relinquishing your sense of self so that you can be the mountain, be the ocean, or uh, let go of your ties to this life. I'm really ambivalent about this type of messaging in Buddhism, but when I listen to this album, it gives me this enormous sense of relief and this existential heaviness that we carry. It speaks very much to a desire to let that go and to connect with the world around, but not to hold it, not to grip it, but just to experience it. Also, on the first track, there's a children's choir from the village where he grew up. They're a refugee choir, so it's just really moving to hear. Philip Glass only plays on one track at the end. There's lots of different guests and musicians through the course of the album. The first song also, I will link the first song in the description. It's like it's a winter song, so you could almost have it as a Christmas song. That is my 10 albums of the year. They're all albums that meant something to me. If you enjoy any of them, please let me know. If you've heard any of them, certainly let me know what you thought of them. I'm now going to go on to my honourable mentions. There are just 5 of these, and I'll try to be pretty quick. So the first one is Kendrick Lamar, GNX. I really like Kendrick Lamar, and coming off the whole rap battle that he had with Drake last year, I was really excited for this album. And when it came out, I listened to it all the time and I really loved it. But I haven't really returned to it that much. So that's why it's not on my list, even though I really did think that a lot of it was excellent. And there's a song on there, Reincarnated, that I'd like to maybe talk about on its own at some point. The next one of my honourable mentions is a band called Me Against Misery, Fire in the Den of Thieves. This is a kind of post-punk, goth, synthwave album that's very political. Half of it is in Welsh and the other half is in English. The only reason really that this isn't on my top 10 is because I know the guy who made this album very well. He used to be a housemate of mine when I was younger, and we've been friends for a long time, so it felt a bit weird to include it in the list. It felt a bit nepotistic. Number 3, honourable mentions, Deafheaven, Lonely People with Power. A bit like Kendrick Lamar's album, I really, really loved this album when it came out earlier in the year. But with time, I've not returned to it as much as I thought that I would. And another thing is that I have a favourite Deafheaven album, which is Ordinary Corrupt Human Love. And this album is similar, but it doesn't top it. 2 final honourable mentions, which are both kind of slightly nepotistic. That's why they're not on the top 10. One of them is Inner Skull, live at Blood Oath Volume 1. This is a band that my close friend Bill plays in. They're a sort of electronic, industrial, experimental, post-throbbing gristle type band. I don't necessarily vibe with all of their music, but this album is an in the studio live recording and they're improvising. And I just think it's like a great documentation of a group of artists and musicians, because the whole concept of this band is that they're not all musicians, they're a collective of artists and musicians who are just like in the zone, just vibing. Things are happening just in the moment, improvisationally, which just work. I just think they nailed it. The last one is that my band Kleinzeit made an album and released it this year. It's kind of tasteless for me to include it in the honourable mentions maybe, but all of this stuff is stuff that meant something to me, and I'm very proud that we created, recorded, finished and released this album despite the fact that those guys live in the UK and I've been living in Norway for many years now. So if you're interested in hearing what type of music I make, this one is kind of a sort more of an indie type sound, maybe you would say. It's not similar to most of the stuff I've had on my top 10, but you might like it. I'm also going to link it in the description. I'd like to thank anybody who's been watching my videos throughout the year. This is going to be the second to last video this year. And I'm going to see you all again in January. Please, again, let me know what you've been listening to, top albums of the year. I will listen to them if you recommend them. Thanks for now.